Hello and welcome back to the Be the Hero channel. My name is Isabelle and I help you understand who you are using personality typing and astrology. Now, before I dive in further, hit the link in the description below to get My Horoscope Made Me Do It merch that's only available now for a limited time. So if you like astrology, you need to grab yourself a hoodie or a t-shirt in the link in the description below. I recently had someone enter my life who does not know a lot about astrology. And this is just a common occurrence. And with that comes the question for any of us new to astrology, what do the planets mean? And, we go about reading our birth chart, reading that our sun is in Aries or our moon is in Cancer, going, okay, that's accurate. But also this is the fact that it's all accurate. I don't really see how it's actually accurate, if that makes sense, in the sense that everything sounds like it's repetitive or saying one thing and then saying another, and we don't see the significance of what they're saying because we lack the understanding of what it means to have a sun in Aries in our fourth house. And so in this presentation, I'm going to break down what each of the planets means in your birth chart and cover a little bit about what it means for them transiting, but I will have that separate for another presentation. So if you have just opened your birth chart or you opened it a while back and you're unsure about what each of the planets mean, I'm going to explain what each planet means in your birth chart in this presentation. So I hope you guys enjoy. As always, I threw this together, just finished it. I'm not one to typo edit things because I have an Aries Mercury and a Mars in Gemini, and I don't do that work. You'll get what I'm saying if there is a typo, and I will explain verbally. But if there's a typo on it and you notice because you have maybe a Mercury in Virgo, I apologize. So sorry, not sorry. So why don't we go ahead and open this up. And also in this, I'm going to cover points because you might notice that while you're reading your chart, there's maybe something called a Lilith or maybe a part of fortune, and you don't know what those are. I'm going to cover this at the end of this presentation too, for those who are curious. And I highly recommend that you stick around because while these first planets that you have to go through, these major 3 and then these major 5 are extremely important to understand, the real good stuff in your chart is going to be later in this video when I dive into the points, which I consider some of the most important parts of your chart. Yes, it's good to have a general understanding of these, but diving into the points is what's going to really change your life. So stick around in this video. Why is it anytime I click my arrow when I first start these, it doesn't work? So I have to eventually learn how to use technology. So in this, I'm going to cover what a birth chart is for those who aren't sure exactly what that means, what the sun is in your birth chart, the moon, your rising, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the North Node, the South Node, Lilith, part of fortune, and Chiron. This is going to be a lot to cover, but trust me, by the end of this video, I know you have a short attention span and it's likely that you already closed this, but by the end of this, you won't have to watch a single video covering these again because I'm going to explain it all simply and in depth so that you can understand exactly how it's affecting you and what it means when someone starts a conversation about these or we hear another astrologer talking about to look at these aspects in your chart. So stick with me on this video. So first, let's start off with what the heck is a birth chart in the first place? Astrology operates on the idea that we are the center of the solar system. So to visually show this, astronomy sees that the sun is the center, and then we have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, etc. Whereas astrology more sees it on one equal playing field from our perception. Astrology is based on the idea that we as from Earth are observing everything happening around us. And so it's all about just how we perceive things, not how they actually are. It's why astrology is so subjective, as I often say. So whereas astronomy sees it as a layering and this more linear frame and realism, astrology sees it more as one equal playing field. And on top of it, taking this initial graphic and adding on the zodiacs. The zodiac wheel is on top of this single ringed orbit that we appear to see all the planets operating off of. Yes, from our view, certain planets can be blocked from view, and this can give a more layering effect, but either way, it's more of this flat dial as opposed to this deeper layering as astronomy shows. So it's all about our view. So imagine you took everything revolved around us and then overlap the zodiac on top of it, dividing it into basically sectors. And then we go even one layer deeper. So before I go to the next slide and show you how it's deeper, really take a moment to process this, because this can be a lot for people to process, just to understand that this is simply astrology. We are at the center, and these planets are moving in just one circle around us. And when it moves into certain signs, we have different effects. It moves through these zodiac signs. So if you then add on, as you'll learn in a birth chart, there's also this other dial called the houses, which you might be familiar with, or you might not be. What I'm going to say initially, for those who are new to their birth chart, the houses offer a lot of depth, but they're not necessary to get a basic understanding and reap rewards from understanding your chart. Yes, you're going to want to know the houses, but don't worry too much about understanding them at first, because having these two dials overlapping can be confusing. But basically, to show how this looks, we have this wheel of the zodiac, and then we overlap the houses as this separate wheel and grid on top of it. It's like two different layers, and they're not going to always be perfectly overlapping, hence why in this graphic I show them as going halfway through each. So you'll have a sign and a house that they're in, and I'll cover later in this video what the difference is between the sign and the houses. So just to recap, astrology sees one playing field, you overlap the zodiac, and then finally, to fully understand astrology, you overlap this other sector as well. I really spent a long time thinking about how I could best show this. So hopefully this clears things up and makes you guys feel like you understand these three layers better. Did you know that most people stop watching my videos around this point right here? Consider this your sign to continue watching, because there's a lot of good information that you're about to receive. So on this idea that this is what the world looks like to us through the lens of astrology, now imagine that at the moment of your birth, we took a screenshot of these planetary placements. This creates your unique birth chart and your personality, as shown here. You can see that this graphic here on the right is very similar to this graphic here on the left. They chose to show it, as astrology usually does, as two dials, and you can think of it as two overlapping dials like that instead, where the houses will be spun one way and the zodiac signs will be spun potentially the other way. I just realize that my devices were not on Do Not Disturb, and I did not want this presentation to be disturbed. So this way they show the dials spinning. Either way, you can think of it as layering or spinning, whichever helps you understand better. There's just two different segments and different layers to it. So we took a screenshot at your moment of birth, and now this is your energetic imprint. It's like we took a screenshot and then we stamped it on you. Congratulations, you're now put into a mold. Just kidding, but slightly. So this is another example of what exactly these dials can look like. As you can see, one dial has spun, as opposed to this first graphic where I show Aries being here or Aries being here. My dial has been spun, so Sagittarius is right here, which I'll explain in an in-depth rising sign video later why this is. But for one reason or another, this dial is spun and this dial is in place. Or also you could say spun. So this is what you're going to likely see when you pull a birth chart. And luckily nowadays they have done a lot of astrology interpreters and programs. They have added a table chart to simply read what your sun is in this, moon is in this, and that can help a lot of people who are not familiar with reading a literal chart, pie chart. It's great to understand this, but you don't have to understand it just yet. So there's your sigh of relief for you. So the big three planets in your birth chart and what they mean. When the most likely actually backing up. You are likely have gone into astrology because you were talking to someone and they asked about your birthday and they asked, do you know your big three? And you just went, what? I know I'm a Virgo. Your big three are the three major planets or three key components of your initial chart to understand. These are the ones that people are going to ask for, and they love to know all three combinations. So understanding your big three is the first step. What are the big three? First off, the sun. This is the one you likely already know before you even pull your chart. The sun changes around the 20th of each month that it shifts signs. And again, the one you already know, where I'm an Aries. This is just though implying where the sun is at your time of birth, at your moment of birth. And this is more general because it moves every 30 days. What does though the sun represent in our chart? Because oftentimes we can be reluctant to go into astrology because we hear about our sun sign or we hear stereotypes about Aries or Taurus or Leo or Virgo and go, that's not really me. Or it sort of is, but not really. So astrology is just spiritual woo-woo. So to understand the sun better, the sun is the giver of life. In astrology, the sun represents vitality, energy, and the core. In our birth chart, the sun is often associated with the ego. The sun is what gives us energy. Its current placement shows what energizes us. In short, the sun in our birth chart is our general vibe and values. It's what energizes us to embrace. So for example, I am an Aries sun, which a lot of you can kind of pick up on who have been subscribers here at Be the Hero channel. And what that means is, generally speaking, I am a very assertive, aggressive, and bold person. That might not be your vibe when you first meet me because of my moon and my rising, but generally speaking, the backbone, so to say, of my being comes and revolves around this desire to be bold, to act off of impulse. It's the general tint of our being. So for me, that's Aries themes of bold, bravery, impulse. Everyone I've met or who has met me picks up on the impulse part for sure. Also, it's what energizes me and it's my values. So I think of the sun sign as whatever sign it's in, it shows you what you see brings you a great life. Now, granted, all of our chart shows us what we value, but the sun specifically can show us a lot about what we value for living life. So in that, what I mean by that is, like, for example, as an Aries sun, I see that a life is best lived when acting off of impulse and being bold. It might not be what I always allow myself to embrace, but that's what I see, that's how I believe I should experience life. The sun is also the ego. So it's this general painted picture of our personality and our general values, but it also can show what limits us. That example of me believing as an Aries sun that a life is best lived off of impulse and assertion, that can serve me well to fulfill myself. But at some point or another, I'm going to realize it's keeping me in my ego. It's keeping me limited. It's keeping me restricted. It's keeping me stuck in a way in a persona. And that's the important thing to note about the sun sign, is that it's going to feel that it's very accurate, but it's also at the same time not just the only part of ourselves. It is the ego self, the general self. It's this broader picture of what we seem to be like, as if we were going to try to simplify our overall core theme, but it's not all that makes us what we are. And I certainly don't consider it the most important aspect to know. Again, it also energizes us to embrace this. So for me as an Aries sun, I feel best at times when I can be impulsive and assertive. And the same will apply to you based off of your sun sign. So if you're a sun in Cancer, you're going to feel energized when you allow yourself to nurture and be nurtured, etc. I could go through each one, but I'll save that for the sun sign series. And you can check that out on Be the Hero channel. And it's the general overview of each sign, which includes it as your sun sign. So that's one of your big three, the sun. Now, the moon. We covered this early in this presentation, but granted, it is one of the most important aspects to know. Along with the points in astrology, I consider the moon sign quite possibly the most important sign to know, or the most important aspect to understand in your chart. Hence why I've created an entire workbook, the Moon Sign Self-Care Workbook, that you can access in the Making Mindfulness Fun bundle in the description below, which covers all of the moon signs and houses. So while the sun is the ego self, this general personality, in your birth chart, the moon is our emotions. And what makes us human is that we have emotions in many ways. We are emotionally driven, no matter how logical we are. I don't care, Brad, if you say, or Carl, if you think that you are acting truly off of rationality, it's an emotional desire. The moon shows us what our emotional patterns will be. It's also the part of us that we keep closest to our hearts, our inner child in many ways. And our moon sign can indicate what emotions we'll struggle with, such as emotional volatility, fear, anger, rigidity, etc. The sign your moon is in shows you how you experience emotions. So for example, yet again, I'm going to use my own chart as a reference point so you guys can understand throughout this video. My sun is in Aries, which means that generally I'm bold and brave. But when you get to know me and see the closest part of me, and when I tap into my own inner child, you'll discover that I'm a moon in Cancer, which means that I'm extremely emotional and sensitive. When I feel safe around people, I'm going to be caring, nurturing, giving, making sure that I'm taking care of my own emotions to the point where my own emotions may dominate me. And this is not the case necessarily for everyone. Some people, the more you get to know them, the more chatty they become. The more they feel safe around you, maybe the more grounded they become, the more you realize they're very, very practical, etc. It all depends on the moon sign. The moon is our emotions. It's what we need for emotional fulfillment. So for me as a Cancer moon, while I may be an Aries sun that believes that a life best lived is off of impulse, eventually I'll realize that that's just the ego desire, and that what I emotionally need on a deeper level is just care, nurturing, and support. Here's a quick pro tip for those who are already good at astrology, and you're probably watching this video and thinking, can we just get to the greater stuff, the cooler stuff? Go to the link in the description below to jump to the point that you're interested in, which if you are already a master at your sun, moon, rising, Venus, and Mars, I recommend you jump to the points in astrology, because these are where the juicy stuff really come out. So that is the importance of the moon sign. And if you can just alone understand your moon sign, your life, I promise you, is going to change. But still keep watching this video if you plan on leaving anytime soon, because that's just two of many points and placements in your chart that, once you understand, will give you a complete understanding of your chart and how much you can really pull from it. So stay with me. And finally, of the big three is your rising. And the rising is something that is often misinterpreted. And really, the most important part of the rising sign is that it dictates the rest of your houses. Your rising sign is the zodiac sign that was on the eastern horizon, rising at the moment of your birth. So if you think of our position from Earth, we're seeing all the constellations go by, and at our moment of birth, whichever one was closest to the horizon, whether that was at the beginning or end of it, that is our rising sign. In your birth chart, it indicates what sign you appear like to others, to put it simply. The rising sign is also known as the ascendant, as you can see here. It'll also be indicated by this arrow. So I'm actually going to be crazy for a second and confuse you guys and jump all the way back to a previous tab. As you can see here, this is my rising. I am a Sagittarius rising. You can tell that because my arrow is pointing here at 9 o'clock, and the AS that is also here. So your rising sign will be indicated by three things: this arrow, which is always at 9 o'clock, the AS or ASC, and also by a Roman numeral I for 1. So your rising sign is your appearance. It's also how we perceive reality. And you can basically think of when the sun, whatever was on the eastern horizon, that shows how we look at the world in many ways. And this is something that a lot of people don't agree with, but taken with a grain of salt, it could be beneficial. So for example, I am a Sagittarius rising. On the appearance realm, it means that I appear optimistic enthusiastic, and open-minded to everyone I meet. People think of me as inspiring and outside-the-box thinker. But also it means that I see life through a lens of what is the purpose? What is the meaning? There's just this natural tendency towards optimism, enthusiasm, and philosophizing. That is not to say that anyone else is not capable of this. It just means that there's this initial, almost primal reaction to how we perceive reality that is associated with our ascendant, as well as our sun and our moon and our Mercury especially so. But the rising is generally our appearance and how we perceive. We, as a Sagittarius rising, there's a mentality to look for the good, so to say. So that's your big three. And you, again, throughout this presentation, these are the symbols associated on the chart to look for each of the placements in your chart. So if you are trying to understand your dial, you would find that your sun would be looking like a circle with a dot in the middle. The moon is shaped like a crescent, and the rising is the arrow so far. So that's your big three. But once you understand that, you're going to find that the description is very finite, especially as far as sun and rising go. Understanding your sun and rising is about understanding just generally how you appear to the world and how you generally are, which can be beneficial. But if you're looking to do more of a self-development journey, or if you're looking to understand your chart on a deeper level, you'll find that there's not much to discover about the sun and the rising for very long. Yes, it's good to understand them, and that is your first step. Once you understand them, you're going to want to look into your big five. So that includes, to start, Mercury. I love talking about Mercury because, frankly, one of the biggest struggles we all have as human beings interacting with human beings is miscommunication. If we could all learn to communicate with each other, I swear we would solve so many more problems and we would have so many less problems. Seriously. Mercury is the planet of the mind. Mercury, the Roman equivalent of the Greek god Hermes, is the messenger of the planets. Mercury shows how we send and receive those messages, the messages being information. We are constantly surrounded by information in this world, whether that's the sky is blue, or this person walking across the street, or Joe just had a baby, whatever it is, there's always information around us. This is all information that we are receiving. It's how we have to perceive it in some way or another. And so Mercury shows us what we tend to naturally observe and how we process that in which we observe. Our Mercury, simply put, shows us how we communicate and learn and perceive. It's how we think, how we best learn, and how we best express and communicate that information back out to the world, or at least what our natural default is. So for example, I am an Aries Mercury, which means that a lot of my learning has to do with physical action, as Aries is ruled by Mars. And it also means that when it comes to communicating information, I am not necessarily the most polite. Aries is impulsive and blunt. And so when it comes to communication, I am impulsive and blunt. Hence why I start to get going talking on these videos, and I need to remember to breathe and slow down. Blame it on my astrology, guys. My horoscope made me do it, which hopefully you grab that in the link in the description below. It also means that when it comes to learning, I want to learn fast. I am a rapid learner, or at least I learn best through doing. So I want to just act on impulse with learning. I don't necessarily think things through. I think often my mentality is don't think, just do. And then once I do, then I learn. I best learn from my mistakes. I'm not the kind to think it through. Whereas some people, based off of their Mercury, are more the type to think it through, to reflect, to take their time, or even be indecisive. Libra Mercury, I'm talking to you. So your Mercury is heavily important for understanding how you communicate, learn, and perceive. After all, I'm going to now want to convince people as an Aries Mercury to just make decisions off of impulse. But that might not be the best way for other people to do things. And that is an important thing to remember. I also need to remember that I might sound more aggressive than I'm meaning to be, and that my tone is not necessarily matching what I'm feeling and trying to communicate internally. So that's something that's super important to understand. Mercury is the key to clearing up communication. And also, since I haven't so far covered the house it's in, the house, again, is where this will show up for you. Understanding the sign is enough for now, though. Venus is stereotypically the planet of romance, love, and flirting. But at her core, she represents wealth and worth. Venus is named after Aphrodite, and Venus rules over all that makes life beautiful. Whoa, English. Venus rules over all that makes life beautiful. Venus indicates our divine feminine energy, as well as what we value. Yin, attract, balance. So to break that down further, everyone has feminine energy. Everyone has masculine energy. The expression of it is different. Women don't just embrace their Venus, they have their Mars masculine energy as well, and vice versa is true for men. Men have Venus energy. It's how they embrace feminine energy, which is generally associated with nonlinear and receptive and creative, intuitive. So Venus in our chart represents what brings us a love for life, as well as what we desire in our love life. And this is slightly different for men and for women, but generally for us all, Venus can show us what makes us feel like life is beautiful, somewhat similar to the sun, whereas the sun shows us generally just how we want to act in the world and feel energized. Venus is what makes us feel that life is beautiful, this more receptive energy. And so when we embrace our Venus, we feel that our love language is fulfilled. And that is the way I simply like to think of Venus is our love language. So for example, I am a Venus in Taurus, which Venus is in its home, one of its home signs. It's so great. And Venus in Taurus means that while my Aries sun wants to be impulsive and my moon in Cancer wants to be nurtured at some times, and my Mercury in Aries makes me communicate in a assertive, bold way, my Venus in Taurus means that I feel the most receptive, feminine, and loved and balanced, and life is truly beautiful when I am surrounded by luxury and comfort and connecting to my five senses, as that is what Taurus rules. So when you think of embracing your Venus, think of what it feels like to be receiving love. That is what Venus rules. It shows us what makes us feel loved. For women, generally, women want to embrace their Venus in the relationship primarily, while of course still having their Mars. And men are attracted to women who are their own Venus. So if a man was to have a Venus in Sagittarius, he's going to be attracted to a woman who has those Venus or those Sagittarius traits. So maybe they're optimistic, enthusiastic, open-minded, adventurous, focused on growth, travel. That's going to be something that a man is attracted to. And women, of course, they want to be in their feminine energy predominantly. So that's what they're going to feel. Venus is this balanced, receptive energy, not this crazy energy. And so it shows us what we like to receive. So Venus is one part of this yin-yang balance. Venus being yin, Mars being yang, which is not hard to see. Mars is divine masculine energy, whereas Venus is feminine. As the planet of action, Mars shows us how we like to move through life and channel physical energy. This is the planet of primal instinct and can show how we express our primal desires. Associated with Mars is more like yang, the chase, the impulse. Our Mars shows us how we like to move through life and channel physical energy. So to simply put, understanding Venus and Mars, Venus is what you love, Mars is how you act. So if you already feel like you have a lot of information, keep it at that. When you look at your Venus, go, this is my love language. And when you look at your Mars, go, this is how I like to take action in the world. And also, on this note, people often get confused between Mercury and Mars, not only just because they both have an M starting their name, but also because they don't see the difference. Mars is about how we like to physically move through life. It shows how we like to take action, express our physical energy. Whereas Mercury is about just how we think and perceive. So mind and body are not the same. Mercury is mind, Mars is body. So Mars is how we like to take action. And in that example, I'm a Mars in Gemini. So while my Mercury in Aries loves to think, process, and learn through impulse and by being bold in my expression, my Mercury is in Gemini, my Mars is in Gemini, which means that I love to learn fast because learning and action do come hand in hand, but they are still separate. I like to act fast, be social, and take in data. I sometimes can get so obsessed with learning as my planet of action is focused on the Gemini archetype of learning and information that I can get overwhelmed. And so physical movement can help me release this energy. I may struggle with overthinking. Mars is named after the god of war. In Roman mythology, that's Mars Ultor. And so and in Greek mythology, it's Aries, hence why Mars rules over Aries. And so Mars shows us how we like to take action. If you have a Mars in Cancer, you need to act in alignment with your emotions. If you are a Mars in Libra, you want intellectual connection in your actions. You want to socialize and connect one-on-one with people, and you can be indecisive about what you do. So Mars is about how we take action. And it's also about how we express primal desire. So Venus is this soft, balanced yin love, receive, attract, and Mars is the chase, which we all have. Primarily, it is masculine energy, so men embrace this more. In general society, it's not always true that men have been embracing their masculine energy more. Oftentimes, we've been in an action-oriented society where everyone's been pulled into their Mars, or we have the masculine woman and the feminine man, which is a bit of inverse energy. Yes, we're supposed to embrace both, but generally speaking, from an energetic, spiritual standpoint, women are supposed to be predominantly in their feminine a little more, and men a little bit more in their masculine. So in this example, Mars is also our primal instinct. So it shows us how we express primal desires, such as survival needs, which is how we pursue shelter, and sexuality. So your Mars shows us your primal sexual desires as well. For women, they are attracted to, like how I said for Venus earlier, and men, they are attracted to men who hold their own Mars qualities. In my example, my Mars is in Gemini, and so men who are intellectual, debative, social, curious is something that I find attractive. And it's how I will express my primal desire in sexuality. And men are going to want to be their Mars when it comes to both life and to sexuality. They want to embrace it. So if a man was a Mars in Gemini, they would want to express themselves, their sexuality, in a intellectual, debative way. They want to seem social. They want to seem curious. They want to have all the information. And they can be very chatty as well, both in the bedroom and in life. And that's how Mars energy works. So Mars, sexual energy, also generally how we take action. So that is your big five. The big five is Sun, Moon, Rising, Venus, Mars, as far as I know. Also, we have Jupiter and Saturn, which now that I think about it, might be more of what the big five is considered. But either way, I wanted to separate Jupiter and Saturn into this different category because they're in this middle spot. I would say they're fairly important to know, but not as important as understanding your Sun, Moon, Rising, Venus, Mars. Jupiter and Saturn form the balance, as I like to call it, and they form this interesting energy that can help us with greater life journeys, partially because they take longer to move. So let's talk about Jupiter first. So Jupiter represents expansion and spiritual evolution. Stereotypically, it's said to be our luck. This planet helps us form our ideologies, similar to the ninth house. At the same time, Jupiter can lead to excess and overindulgence. Jupiter is associated with Zeus. It's associated, you could say, with words like nonlinear, faithful, and optimistic. If you know anything about astrology, think of Jupiter energy similar to ninth house energy or Sagittarius energy, as this is what Jupiter, is associated with. Jupiter, simply put, is our expansion. In our chart, Jupiter shows us how we can seek physical and spiritual expansion. Or I should have put, instead of physical, more so material. In this example, I am a Jupiter in Virgo, which means that I feel expansive and can gain luck in both and expand both my spiritual being and my material life by being selfless, seeking to serve, and paying attention to the details, which here, I hope at Be the Hero channel, I am doing well. Jupiter is this expansive energy, and that's why at the same time, things can expand too far. We need healthy structure. Think of it like a muscle. We are supposed to stretch our muscles to expand their capacity, but at the same time, overstretching leads to injury, which is why, while we need this optimistic, faithful luck energy that can help us expand and stretch, we also need contraction and strength, which is Saturn. While Jupiter is expansion, Saturn is contraction. Saturn is a lot like our inner adult. It reminds us that limitation and boundaries can be healthy. Like that muscle metaphor I just gave. We want to stretch our capacities and stretch our muscles, but we also want to make sure we're not overstretching and leading to injury, which is why we need them to contract. Saturn has become very fear-mongered or negative to a lot of society because we think expansion, that's so great. Contraction, not really. But through this standpoint of seeing it as a muscle, we understand its benefit and its need even more so. Saturn is equivalent to the Greek god Cronus, who is the god of harvest. And you can think about Saturn that way. Saturn is how we receive luck and benefit through hard work, which is why it's our inner adult. Jupiter, which is nonlinear, just goes, take the leap of faith. Just go for it. Don't think about how it's going to work. Just try, whatever that is. Maybe you have a Jupiter in Aries or Jupiter in Taurus. Whatever it is, that shows how you take that leap of faith and how you tap into this nonlinear, optimistic energy that doesn't think things through, but still reaps reward. And Saturn is where we go, okay, here's the plan. And here's how I'm going to maintain responsibility in order to achieve my goals. Linear, logical, realistic. Saturn knows how the world works and applies that in order to reach their goals methodically. Saturn is associated with Capricorn. And if you know anything about the Capricorn archetype, it'll help you understand Saturn better. Saturn in our chart reminds us how we should practice self-control and self-responsibility. So in example, actually, before I get into the example, in society, we have become basically this 50-50 split. People who heavily lean into their Saturn and people who heavily lean into their Jupiter. And this has caused an imbalance in us all because we need both. We need that expansion, that stretch, and that contraction. But generally speaking, we reach into one or the other. I know for certain that I have in my life reached much more heavily into Jupiter's energy. It feels so much better to just work hard and not think about the results of how it's going to work and just expand, but then I'm burnt out. And my Saturn, which is in Cancer, demands that I move at a methodical pace where I allow myself to nurture and be nurtured. And that is what Saturn will represent for you. When you feel burnt out, if you feel like you've overstretched yourself or stretched yourself too thin, that's when you want to look into Saturn. On the other hand, the people who look into Saturn or feel into Saturn's energies too heavily are the people who feel that they must be responsible at all times, whether that they believe being responsible is working hard or even pushing themselves hard or not having fun, whatever it is, depends on your sign your Saturn is in. These people need more of a stretch. They are in a way too much in their comfort zone. They're living too rigid, like a child that's been grounded and not allowed to leave their room. They don't know what the world is like. And so they can't experience growth. They can't experience any expansion or renewal. So Saturn and Jupiter are a great part to understand in your chart when you're looking for more balance and self-care and also spiritual evolution. Now, we still have a few more planets to cover, and these are the less personal planets in your chart. When it comes to personally doing birth chart readings, which I do offer, and I hope you book after watching this video, I rarely ever cover these planets that are following, only as much as they make aspect to something else. And if you don't know about the aspects, videos coming soon, but there's all those crazy lines that are going across the center of your chart. Those are aspects. And so I consider these planets only important to how they make aspect to the rest of the chart. These are generational planets though, and understanding maybe your generational planet will help you understand your generation better and the people that you fit in with. So let's start with the first more so generational planet, Uranus, which I know could be pronounced Uranus, but we're going to go with Uranus, as I've been told is pronounced by other people. Uranus is like the lightning bolt in astrology, even though it's not ruled by Zeus. Uranus also represents innovation, rebellion, and revolution. It's this impulse energy. Uranus is how we rebel and think differently. It is said to be, interesting fact, the higher vibration of Mercury, which has helped me understand Uranus a little bit better. This is less personal and more generational because Uranus changes signs roughly every 7 years. So depending on when it changed signs, you in a 7-year age group all have Uranus in the same sign, which shows how basically how you guys rebel against the system to some degree, or how you are different, how you think differently. And when embraced heavily, it's how you want to rebel. Whenever a current planet transits over our natal Uranus, so if Mercury were to cross paths or Venus were to cross paths with where Uranus is at your moment of birth, Uranus, if something unexpected can happen. Uranus also shows us how you're unconventional. So for example, I have my Uranus in Pisces, about early degrees of Pisces, somewhere early degrees. And this means that I see the world, and my 7-year age group sees the world differently by being extra sensitive. We have this artistic view that we all share in a subtle way. These generational planets are very subtle energy. It also means that whenever something transits over Pisces, I could have an unexpected change happening in my life. Something unexpected could happen related to Pisces energy. Maybe I'm feeling extra sensitive, etc. Uranus is impulse. And I think it's just much more important to know for transiting Uranus or when planets cross over. But overall, Uranus shows how we think differently. You and your 7-year age group. Neptune moves every 14 years. And Neptune is named after the sea god, which in Greek mythology is Poseidon, and represents energetic waters. Neptune is associated with inspiration, dreams, illusion, and confusion. Think of the ocean, how deep and mysterious it is, and how we don't really know all what's down there, and we certainly don't know what's under us right now. Neptune is associated with these things. It's said to be the higher vibration or octave of Venus, which can help us understand Neptune well. Venus, the planet of love. Neptune shows us how we seek beauty through spiritual receptivity and breaking free of limitations of matter and reality. It's how we basically see the beauty of the world through non-linear means, through not the material, but through this intuition, so to say. And to a lot of people who are not very spiritual and learning about astrology, that makes them go, what? But Neptune is about how we see this universe as beautiful. In our birth chart, Neptune shows us our collective idealism and disillusionment. So think about that higher octave of Venus again. An example, I believe, my Neptune is in Aquarius. So my 14-year age group is idealistic in that we can innovate, we can help humanity, we can raise the collective vibration, the collective, the collective, the collective. Everyone should be using their talents, but at the same time, we can be unrealistic in that. And we can also become a little bit emotionally detached in this approach and less personal. Whereas depending on your Neptune, for your 14-year age group, you may see helping the world and making life beautiful through different means. So your Neptune in your chart could show where you are idealistic or how you're idealistic, and also where you may hold disillusionment. Again, I would say the effects of Neptune truly are only important in two ways. One, if you have a planet making aspect to it, this can point to confusion, or if you have a planet transiting over it. So if we were in Aquarius season or a planet was transiting across Aquarius, for me, that could point to some confusion and brain fog and disillusionment, as that is what Neptune represents. Pluto. Now, actually, of these three minor planets, I would consider Pluto a little more important because, and you'll see why in a second. Pluto is the planet of death, rebirth, power, and shadows. Pluto is associated with Hades and takes 248 years to go around the zodiac. So that could be because of its very unique orbit. It could be in each zodiac sign between 12 and 31 years. Pluto has a lot to do with secrets, crime, and obsession. When expressed in the negative, it can bring out our worst. Pluto is very, very fear-mongered in astrology nowadays, especially transiting Pluto, which currently went retrograde in Capricorn. This is because of its obvious associations: death, rebirth, crime, Hades, the god of the underworld. We see Pluto as a very negative thing. But Pluto is about transformation and rebirth in the end. In our chart, Pluto represents the transformation and healing work that is dedicated to each generation. At least that is my interpretation of Pluto. So Pluto is very important in about where it sits in your chart and how it makes aspect to the rest of your planets. But it also simply shows that what it is that you're here to heal for the collective. For example, I work with a lot of people whose Pluto's in Scorpio. And a lot of people who have Pluto in Scorpio felt like they grew up in an unstable household full of secrets or full of affairs, or they just felt unstable. There was not a sense of stability in the household, and there was a mistrust. This whole generation has work to do with healing their relationship with the Scorpio archetype to form true, honest, authentic intimacy, and also to avoid disillusionment and open back up to trust again, which we can see in the world. This is generally the millennial generation that has Pluto in Scorpio, and we can see this very well. So wherever Pluto is in your chart shows you what healing work you're here to do and transformation you're supposed to do for that generation. So that is all the planets in your chart. Now let's dive into the points in your chart, which if you're still watching this, I applaud you. Bravo. You have stuck around long enough, and I thank you, because you guys are the ones who keep this channel running, and also the ones who are looking to actually grow and understand astrology. It takes a lot to be on YouTube and stick around for almost 40 minutes or whatever. I don't even know how long I've been talking for. About 40 minutes, I think, maybe 50. And it takes a lot to not get caught up in the next information. And so if you're here at this point, thank you. So let's talk about the most important parts, or some of my favorite parts to talk about in a chart, which is astrological points, or as I said here, aspects. Starting off with one of two of this one aspect I really consider of a chart, which is the South and North Node. The South Node, which is symbolized by this upside down horseshoe, is a point on the moon's orbit that represents what we've already mastered. But these traits and qualities can keep us limited in life now. The South Node is also known in Vedic astrology as Ketu, which is the body of the dragon. In our chart, the South Node represents our overused gifts and talents that we can utilize to spiritually evolve and work towards our North Node. I love the North and South Node. They have helped me so much in my journey, and I think they're going to help you too if you understand them. So look at the sign that your South Node is in. The South Node for you shows what it is you overuse. So for me, for example, my South Node is in Scorpio, which means that I generally am someone who already overthinks a ton, investigates everything, has a gift for investigating, and to be obsessive. To some degree, I'm also great at being codependent on people in the sense of forming a close connection with them. But the problem is that I overuse this and it can keep me limited in life now. Bad karma, so to say, could come up from it if karma is something you believe in. If you do not, it is simply something we overuse and that keeps us restrained. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, the South Node is like the Enneagram stress number. And that is the way that I thought of it when I first got into it that really helped me out. So your South Node is not just what you're supposed to completely move away from, it's also what some of your greatest talents and gifts, which is good. So you should use it in moderation. So it's not that I should, as a Scorpio South Node, completely forgo my investigative nature. I just need to use it in moderation and balance it and use it to reach towards my highest path to growth, which is my North Node. The North Node in astrology is known as Rahu, which is the head of the dragon. I really like the Vedic astrology interpretation of the North and South Node simply because I love dragons, but also because they explain well how Rahu is the head of the dragon, which means it should be the mind and that governs everything we do. Whereas the South Node, the body of the dragon, Ketu, shows us basically the body of our being, our strengths that we can channel while our North Node leads the way for us. It is our North Star, so to say, and our South Node is the traits and qualities we take with us on that journey. The North Node is the hardest for us to embrace, and it's what we must grow into to counterbalance the South Node traits. In our chart, the North Node represents our highest path to growth in this lifetime. For those who believe in reincarnation, the role that the North and South Node play is the South Node is said to be our past life karma and what we mastered in our past life. And our North Node is what we're supposed to work towards in this lifetime. For those who don't believe in reincarnation, think of it simply as our overused gifts and talents and our growth in this lifetime. We can reap material benefit in our material world when we embrace our North Node. North Node brings material benefit while South Node brings spiritual benefit. And the South Node is a lot of healing work too. It can show us what we have to heal our relationship with. For me, that was about learning to, as a Scorpio South Node, have healthy intimacy and healthy sexuality and healthy obsession to some degree, healthy passion instead of obsession and codependency. The North Node is our growth. And seriously, so the moon, the North and South Node, and one more aspect are what I consider the most important to know in your chart, which I'm about to get to, which is the Black Moon Lilith. So cool. I'm really hyped to tell you guys about this if you cannot tell. So Black Moon Lilith is another point in our chart, not a planet. Lilith, background on Lilith. Lilith was the first wife to English. Lilith was said to be the first wife of Adam, who was rejected from the world because of her power. In our chart, Lilith represents the talents and powers we feel ashamed of because we could be rejected, and so we become submissive, repressing these parts of ourselves. Lilith is powerful when we embrace her with confidence and authority. In short, our Lilith sign is what we are most ashamed of and yet holds some of our greatest powers. I love the interpretation behind astrology, behind Lilith, and why they chose the name Lilith for this aspect in our chart, because that is truly what it represents for us. As a Lilith in Gemini, I have a gift for curiosity, for taking in information, and being a little chatty at times. I feel great when I'm being social, but this can rub people the wrong way, being this social butterfly who is always asking questions. But at the same time, when I embrace this is some of my greatest powers, and I might be rejected from the wrong people because of it, but the right people will accept it. So the Black Moon Lilith is a place of shame that can offer us an opportunity to do deep healing work and also help us embrace our powers, which can in turn help us with manifestation. If you are looking to manifest, embracing your North Node and your Lilith in the healthy ways is going to be the biggest thing for you. Also, any planets that are near your North Node and your Lilith. So for example, my Mars is in Gemini and so is my Lilith, and my Venus is conjunct my North Node in my chart. So embracing those is going to be important for me if I want to manifest. Same thing applies to you, just depends on your chart. And we have the part of fortune, which I'm going to be doing a whole video series on, as well as Black Moon Lilith. And I already have one up about the North Node. Yeah, I actually have two technically up about the North Node, one for the current North Node and one for North Nodes and charts. And I have one that I'm going to do for the Lilith, a whole presentation, and for a part of fortune. But let's just talk a little bit about it now. The part of fortune is a mathematical point in your chart calculated by your sun, moon, and rising. Fortuna, which is the other name for part of fortune, indicates what energy to tap into for abundance in your career and health. Part of fortune is very important in aspect to the rest of your chart. Our part of fortune indicates where we can find our talents, career success, and physical health. So for example, for me, my part of fortune is in Virgo and my Jupiter's there. So I have a lot of luck around the Virgo archetype already. My part of fortune in Virgo means that when I focus on having a routine, serving others, being detail-oriented and service-oriented, I will find career success. It'll benefit my physical health, and I have a talent for it. I have a talent for being practical, pragmatic, and detail-oriented. Even though I'm an Aries who loves to act on impulse at times, I also have a gift for following the system and for following the instructions and just doing my task. And the same thing could apply to you if you have a part of fortune in Virgo, and it'll be different for you based off of what sign your part of fortune is in, which is indicated by this circle with an X. Depending on the sign and the house it's in will show you where you may experience luck, career success, and physical health, and also how you can best do so. I'm learning even more about the part of fortune, which is why it's probably going to be the next presentation I put together, but seriously, so cool. And finally, Chiron in astrology. Chiron is an asteroid in our chart known as the wounded healer, and the name signifies its meaning well. Chiron represents energies and topics that we hold wounds around, and yet we try to help others overcome their wounds around these topics freely, often healing them well as well. Chiron is what we freely offer to heal in others, but struggle to heal within ourselves. Hence why it's the wounded healer. Picture a wounded soldier in battle, or a wounded medic in battle, taking care of everyone else. And even though they're bleeding, they're going to take care of everyone else first. And eventually they'll get around to taking care of themselves. But it'll take a while. So for example, I have, I believe, my Chiron. And what that means is I have wounds around the Capricorn archetype and yet want to heal it with other people. So I will go, oh, you guys should all just focus on abundance, follow your career path, be disciplined, blah, blah, blah. But me, no, I don't deserve abundance. I don't get that. And I especially don't get monetary abundance since it's in my second house. Chiron shows us what we struggle with ourselves, but also inspire other people to embrace as well. And the one thing is, the wounded healer, the more we help others heal this energy, oftentimes we can heal ourselves along the way. At times we need to focus on ourselves, but for the most part, we can experience healing in our Chiron by helping others. I got a notification that my internet connection was unstable, so I'm going to probably speed up a little to finish this presentation before it breaks out. So you understand now all of the planets and all of the signs that are in all the planets and all of the aspects and points in your chart. But what does it mean for it to be in a sign versus a house? As I covered in the beginning of this presentation, you have each planet and point in a sign and a house, and you need to know them both eventually. You can start by just knowing the sign, but I highly recommend knowing the house because oftentimes astrology feels inaccurate because we hear about an energy, you are like this. And we think, not really, but it's because we're only like that in a certain facet of our life. So the sign, think of the sign such as Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. That's the vibe, the energy, the personality of the planet. The planets rule over different aspects of our being, and the signs show us how we embrace what the vibe is of them. Oh, your Jupiter, your expansion is in Aries, so you expand when you are impulsive. The house, however, is where this will show up for you. So in that example I just made up of Jupiter, the planet of expansion, being in Aries, which means expansion through being impulsive and taking on challenges, if it's in your second house of money and wealth, that means that being impulsive and taking on challenges in your money is going to lead to your expansion. So there are 12 signs in 12 houses, so many different combinations you could have. So whatever interpretation you're seeing for each planet in a sign, remember that there's also a house there it's in, and that implies where you're going to feel this. I will not cover in this video what each of the signs and houses are, but I will have a separate video eventually going out about that. But if you want to understand the signs and the houses, then you're going to just want to grab my simple guide to astrology, zodiac signs and houses, which is available in the Making Mindfulness Fun bundle, which I'll tell you where you can access that in a minute. But I have put together an entire workbook, or not even workbook, an ebook covering each of the zodiac signs in complete detail, also simplified, so that you can understand each of the archetypes as well as each of the houses, so that you can understand how to interpret your astrology better. That is in the Simple Guide to Astrology, Zodiac Signs, and Houses. And in this bundle, you also get the birth chart workbook, which could help you break down each of these aspects that I just talked about in your chart in your own process through journaling. These are all journal prompts in this workbook that I have used to understand my own chart and have helped me so much. So you get access to these two workbooks in the bundle, the Making Mindfulness Fun bundle, as well as 28 other workbooks and courses. And you can go to the link in the description below to get that now. So hit the link in the description below to get this bundle while it's still available for a limited time and get lifetime access to the Making Mindfulness Fun bundle, which includes 30 workbooks and courses on astrology and more. There you have it, guys. Hopefully this video felt very detailed and helped you understand all of the planets and points in your chart. If you have any more questions about your chart or just questions about astrology in general, then please, I would love to have you book a reading with me in the link in the description below, or you can go to the link makingmindfulnessfun.com/product/coaching-Isabelle. Just hit the link in the description below. It's easier. There's the link if you need it, but book a reading with me to get these questions answered. If you want just your questions answered fast, book the half-hour call for $30, so where you can just ask away. Or if you want to actually just understand your astrology and someone to basically give you, in a way, the in-depth cliff notes, as my mom likes to say, bluff, bottom line up front. If you want the bottom line up front on exactly who you are in detail and what your purpose is, you don't care to know that your Mars is in Virgo and you just want to hear what you're good at, what you can do, and get those questions answered in whatever way you deem best, and you want an in-depth report, then book the 1-hour self-revolution reading in the same link in the description below. Hit that link to find out more now. Thank you guys again so much for watching this video. If you are watching this part right now as I'm speaking, I thank you so much, because you guys are the reason this channel stays running and allows me to serve you guys better. So if you have something else that you want to see filmed or talked about, let me know in the comments below, and I will be sure to film it, since you guys are true subscribers who are watching all the way through the channel and are truly here to support us, and I want to support you. So let me know in the comments below what you want to see next if you're watching right now. And again, hopefully this gave you guys a clear overview of all the different planets and what they mean. If you have any other questions, let me know in those comments below, and I will be sure to clarify. More presentations coming soon on the points such as Black Moon Lilith, part of fortune, and whatever else you guys want to know about, let me know. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more videos breaking down the stars. Once again, my name's Isabelle, and from my heart to yours, namaste.